I learned something interesting just the other day. You know, in this country, in the United States, July 4th is Independence Day. I recently learned that July 4th in the United Kingdom is Alice in Wonderland Day. It sort of makes sense to me that something that talks about freedom and something that else that talks about freedom happened kind of on the same day. The first time that the story of Alice was told is on a boat with Alice and her sisters and Reverend Dodson telling the story of Alice as they went down the river. And that's interesting to me. It also is interesting in the way that the illustrations of that particular book have evolved. If you look at the original illustrations that John Tennell did back in the 1860s, we have black and white line drawings that have interesting perspective, big heads and odd shaped animals and that sort of thing. And that in turn has evolved into other illustrations interpreting, or other illustrators interpreting Alice. One of the most interesting ones, I think, is the way that Salvador Dali has interpreted Alice. He's taken a sort of surrealistic literary work and added his own surrealistic illustrations. He starts with a presentation that is sort of Renaissance in the way that he puts it together. A plain brown leather spine with clasps that are the traditional way of presenting a book. And then as you open it up, you find a signed title page. And he's done one illustration for each of the chapters. Here is Down the Rabbit Hole. And so all of a sudden you find this wonderful explosion of colors, an explosion of the things that he's presenting. And I just think that it's interesting to look at how different artists have interpreted or presented different kinds of books. Here's another example. Here's an early edition of the Ozma of Oz, one of the books in the Oz series. And in this case, we have John Arneal, the original illustrator, presenting us with a scarecrow and a tin man with Dorothy. And then, more recently, we have Greg Hildebrand, a more modern artist who has his interpretation of the Scarecrow and the Tin Man and Dorothy. And here we have an interesting illustration here as well, with lots of light and color and almost comic book in interpretation. It's a lot of fun to look at different classics as they've come down to us over the years and how different artists have interpreted their works. It's interesting how these things play out in our mind too. I know that here at the store when we get sometimes we'll get a call for I want a copy of Mother Goose or Robert Louis Stevenson's Child's Garden of Verses. And we say, sure, we have one. And the people come in and they take a look at it and they say, that's not my Child's Garden of Verses. So it's interesting the way that these illustrations and these interpretations have a way of becoming a part of us. And I hope it becomes a part of you as well. I wanted to talk a little bit about the values of the books that we've seen today in this particular segment. It happens that the original edition of Lewis Carroll's Alice was done in a very small edition. In fact, Lewis Carroll didn't like some of the original illustrations, so the book was taken off of the market. So there are very, very few copies of the 1865 London edition in existence. And those books have huge value, tens upon tens of thousands of dollars. The American edition is really the first accessible edition, and that too has value in the tens of thousands. The one that we looked at today, Salvador Dali's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, is a book that has a value of about $10,000 or $15,000. Similar to the Alice, the original edition of Oz is a book that had a very limited distribution and consequently has value in the tens of thousands of dollars. Condition in all of these instances is important, and the book that we looked at, the Ozma book, is not in the best of condition. That was a $50 book. If it had been in nice condition, perhaps several hundred, and of course the earliest edition of The Wizard of Oz is something that has a value of, again, tens of thousands of dollars. There are many different editions of Child's Garden of Verses, and according to the illustrations and the condition is the values. And again, Mother Goose has been illustrated many, many times by many, many illustrators, and the value varies considerably. Something to keep in mind, of course, is that prices do change over time, and as tastes in collectors and the market change. Also, condition is always important, and so you need to be on the lookout for that kind of thing.